This video today is about a very rare piece of equipment. It's one of 59 ever built, but this is a General Motors BL2 diesel locomotive, and the BL stands for branch line. It was built for the Bangor and Aroostook Railroad back in 1949, and it was in service up until about the early 1980s, and in that time it had put on about 1.6 million miles, so it's been around a little bit. But there's a big 16-cylinder engine inside, and what we're going to do with this video is we're actually going to head into the nose of the machine, take a look around in case none of you have ever been in a locomotive before. Hopefully you can actually see one, and then we'll head into the cab and look at some of the gauges and the things the engineer can see, and then we'll move on into the engine compartment and we'll take a quick look back there just to see what an engine compartment of a diesel locomotive looks like. Okay, now we're on the nose of the locomotive, and this is how we're going to get inside. Looking towards the locomotive, you can see where the engineer would sit, and we've got a mannequin right there, and we've got our large horn and bell, and even our nose lights right there. And it's a big platform, it's about 2 feet wide, but we're going to go ahead through this door right here, and I've already pre-lit the inside because it's actually kind of light, I should say kind of dark in here. But in the nose of this locomotive are some weights. Actually, there's a big weight right here. There's a box right here. There are blowers right over here in the corner that are used to cool the traction motors while it's in service, and some other auxiliary equipment. I'm not too sure what every little system does, but there's quite a bit of pneumatic air stuff. There's also a toilet that's in here because, you know, engineer, fireman, they've got to use the restroom at some point in time. But there's various little switch gears and little motors and various things that the locomotive needs to run. And this little spot here, it sounds like it feels a little bit like a submarine. That's because we're essentially enclosed in a large metal shell. We're going to head on now. We're going to go up these 2 steps here. We're going to go into the locomotive cab. So as we come out into the locomotive cab, the first thing that we see are the electrical panel. And behind the panel here, I'm going to go ahead and open this door. You have a lot of the electrical switchgear dealing with the generator and various other electronic systems that are in the locomotive here. And it's usually kept behind these panels. And you'll notice in the cab here, there's a lot of soundproofing metal around on the roof and on the sides, because you can imagine it'd be quite loud in here with the big diesel engine in the back. We have various gauges, fuel oil, lube oil pressure, water temperature, amp meters, various gauges the engineer would need to keep an eye on the engine. And as we come around a little bit, we have the door to the cab that goes directly to the cab. If you lean out a little bit, you can see we're up right in the locomotive cab, and we roll back in here. We have our mannequin locomotive engineer here, and he's got, once again, I don't know the details of how to operate a locomotive. There is a video for sale here at the museum that goes through the operation of each gauge and each handle, but there are brakes and power, various radio systems and speed and such. And then over here there's the fireman's seat where they would sit, and where I'm going to sit. They would have a pretty good view of the railroad. They'd look forward and they could see over the nose of the engine here. And the control he has is he's got a heater switch, whatever those 2 little switches are. And then in this box right here, there's actually it's like a glove box. So not a lot of controls for him to do, but I'm sure that when the locomotive stops or he's got this panel to control, he's going to have his hands filled. But this is the cab of number 557 BL2 locomotive, and now we're going to be heading on into the engine compartment, which is right behind us. I'm not sure how camera friendly we're going to be back here, but we have a large 16-cylinder diesel. It is a 2-stroke diesel. So in order to keep air in it, we've got a pair of centrifugal blowers, air filters. What's neat about this locomotive is it actually draws its air right from the engine compartment here. And if you notice that right here, and it's going to be hard to show, this is a large electrical generator, 600 volts, but this is pretty much the heart of the machine. Now as we go along here, we've got air breathers, and you can see some of the generator windings and coupling, and we come down here to the actual meat of the diesel engine, and up there we have our exhaust manifolds. And we have these various engine ports that you could open up, and if you needed to check on something, you could actually take a peek inside and see if where it was going along. Or you wouldn't do it while operating, but when you had the engine down for maintenance, And then above me, I believe, are large radiator coolers to help keep this engine cool, especially on a nice hot summer day. And I'm out of extension cord on my, my lamp here, because it is very dark back here regardless, even if you have a flashlight. But you can look another window into the cab there. And we're going to go all the way to the back, and then we'll head out the rear door so we can take a look at the air compressors that live back there. Well, golly, if I didn't have power right in the back of this locomotive, I found an outlet right on the wall there, so I can actually power my light. Our motor's right in front there. What we have are lube oil coolers, cooling water. We also have large air compressors back here, large air tanks, because obviously the train has a air brake system it needs to feed. At my feet here, we have a pair of traction motor blowers that are going to help keep it cool. This box right here that's all rusty, and there's another one on the other side, and there's also one in the front, holds sand, traction sand, just like you'd put dirt on a road to give you more traction. This locomotive has the ability to put sand on the tracks to give it a little bit more traction. And we've got various filters, and here's right underneath, these are some cooling fins for a very large air compressor. And it is driven off the large diesel you see here. In fact, I've got a better view of the diesel right here. And you can see the large exhaust manifold and the water pumps on the front of this unit. A lot of auxiliary equipment, and then once again you have the wide open access, all of 1 foot square. It's pretty claustrophobic in here if you didn't like it, but it's pretty much all engine. Later on, diesel locomotives would be built like a flat car with a big engine on them, but this one is very similar to the first generation. It's built on a frame, and so kind of like a truss bridge. So it actually uses the structure to help hold up the locomotive. So there's a lot of structures and stuff on the side there. And you can see the ladder forward, that goes right up to the engineer. So you can actually get on along both sides of the locomotive if you needed to do work. And if we turn around here, right by our tanks there, we keep going back, and eventually we make it out of our locomotive. Now there's no walkway on the side of this engine. So if you were going from one unit to the other, you had to go through the inside of it. So you can imagine if this one's going all out, and you had about 3 or 4 of these in a row, and you were at the last locomotive and you had to go forward, you had to go through 4 of these. It's really, really, really loud. But that's how you did it back then. And the branch line, pretty much it was this. See how it's dipped in towards the top? And we can see the engineer. Prior to this, the engineer had to stick his head out the window and look back if he wanted to see over his train and he was heading in the forward direction. Of course, here we've got one boxcar and a caboose. But hopefully you've enjoyed the tour of the BL2 locomotive, and I'll try to get some stuff up on a website with some more inside pictures for those of you that have a little bit more interest in this very rare diesel locomotive.